Revelation 2915. From the 9th of October 1943. Destruction of the solid form. Beginning of the course of development. The will to serve frees the spiritual from solid form, from hardest matter, and opens up the possibility of higher development for it. And this liberation from form is a process which always becomes evident and which is mostly connected with enormous expressions of the forces of nature which God uses to destroy hard matter. After an infinitely long time the spiritual is released from the first cover, the form is blown up so that the spiritual scatters into innumerable particles, that it certainly still remains in the same matter which, however, is now assigned a serving activity, either again as matter for new creations by human hands or also in smallest reduction for the reception of vegetable substances, depending on its nature and the strength of the will to serve. This is, so to speak, the beginning of the development, which now proceeds again and again in a changed external form. A work of destruction is always God-willed if it proceeds without human influence or if a destruction of matter is undertaken in order to be able to form things which fulfill a serving purpose. It is therefore only dependent on God's will when the spiritual begins the path of development, for this spiritual has then expressed its will of its own accord for serving activity. But the spiritual in the solid form can also become free through human hand and human will, through the exploitation of the earth, through the lifting of treasures which the earth's interior holds, and this process of dissolving or liberating matter is also willed by God, yet the prerequisite is always that this exploitation is for the benefit of humanity, that the lifted treasures are therefore intended to serve people, to cover their necessities of life, and are therefore necessary for life. Then the liberation of the spiritual from solid form is equivalent to the process of destruction by natural forces, by eruptions which stir up the earth's interior and bring it to the surface. Such eruptions will mostly take place where human hands have little access. Indeed, through such eruptions an area will often first come into being which can be made habitable by people, so that the spiritual, which now shows itself willing, will be offered the opportunity to carry out a serving activity. The spiritual being in the last stage of development, the human being, is always in direct contact with the spiritual being which begins its earthly career. The former needs the latter, and thereby it gives the latter the possibility of higher development. Mostly earth eruptions bring men into a trouble, which lets them become immensely active, and so increased possibilities are given that the spiritual, which has become free, can take up residence in new formations, because the activity of men is necessary to form things, which again fulfill a serving purpose. But through divine will also the spiritual comes to its serving purpose, whose coverings are not accessible to human hands. Time and again it serves one another in nature, for God has created opportunities everywhere for the spiritual to mature in every form once it has manifested its will to serve. Amen.